Hello, everybody, and welcome to You Know I. If you've not been here before, my name is Melody, and I've started this podcast just to learn a little bit more about the world, talk to some interesting people, and understand their perspectives about things. This is episode 4. Wow. All right. Yeah, it's taken a little while to get used to things, getting used to the interview process, getting used to talking into a microphone, trying to record and edit and get this out on Monday. I'm currently recording this Monday night. I was hoping to release an episode every Monday, but better late than never. Yeah. Anyway, today. No, I recorded this interview about 6 weeks ago. But it's an interesting one. I chat to my friend Morad. I met Morad at radio school. So we ended up connecting over having similar sort of political views, I will say, and just both being open-minded and wanting to listen to each other. But yeah, this interview I did was an interesting process for me because I don't really know a lot about the ideas that we speak about. But I mean, yeah, I'm just learning as I go. So I pick Morad's brain about globalization. I ask him what that is. He explains it to me, and then we sort of delve into it a bit more and work out is it a good thing? Is globalization a good thing, and the impacts it's had on our world? We talk about having a cultural identity and a national identity, and is it good to have both? Do they work together? We also talk about being a centrist, being moderately political and trying to look at both sides of the argument. So yeah, I hope you enjoy it. All right, let's do it. All right, Morad, welcome to my podcast.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here. Yeah. I'm quite excited.
Are you?
What number interviewee am I?
I think you're number 5.
5? Oh, that's my favorite number.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay, but now that I have to think about it, you're actually number 4.
4? Oh,
yeah.
Well, that's 4 corners of the world. Global number. Global number.
You'll make whatever you make out of that.
Yeah. That's a globalist. I'm a globalist.
Oh, that's dangerous. What is a globalist?
Globalist.
Is a globalist a good thing?
Well, it depends. Do you think, when you hear the word globalist, do you think a unified world where all the countries are dealing and trading with each other in harmony and people across the planet are flying to everywhere and people are meeting everyone and there's cross marriages and all these sort of benefits, the benefits of each country being explored by other peoples, right? Or when you hear globalists, do you think a one world government, a one world religion, an evil ruler, ruling the whole planet?
I probably think the first definition you just gave, but it sounds like a fairy tale.
Yeah, it sounds hard because of all the divisions in the world and between peoples and countries.
Well, you said this to me before. Actually, one time you said we're inherently tribal.
Yeah.
So it's sort of impossible to have a global world like that, right? See, the word impossible, is it? I think you're right. It's impossible. Only because it's impossible because the divisions are so much and so many that it's hard to unify. It's hard to overcome all these divisions. But it's not impossible to take it very far to the... I mean, you can... It's close to perfect.
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
You'll never get it perfect.
No, you'll never get it perfect. So you'll never get a unified world, but the time is coming where the world will unify, not to the full extent of unification, but close to it.
So there will be a one world order.
Well, there will be. See, that's the thing. Would it be a one world order? Is it a one world order, or is it just sovereign nations living in harmony with other sovereign nations?
Is it zero sum?
Well, it doesn't have to be. See, if it was zero sum, if you go in trying to unify the world on a zero sum formula, then no one will take part.
Right.
It can't be. By definition, it can't be a zero sum game because some nations know that they will lose. And so why would they even get involved in the first place?
Right.
Why would they interact with another nation?
Yeah, but the way in the Western world we're able to live the way we are, like we ship all our work over to China.
The whole before the China thing, shipping jobs or manufacturing overseas, right? The nation used to do it. So what happened then was a factory will open, people go to work, the factory will produce products, sell it in the market in that same country, and everything was going smoothly. But as time went on, standards of living were rising. What that means is people were expecting more in terms of their lifestyle. So, for example, if you work extra hours, you expect to get paid overtime. If you're a woman and you're having a baby, you expect to get time off work, right? So I'm using very basic examples here, but standards, that's what I mean by standard of living. Things that weren't normal are now normal, right? People expect more from their work, from their lifestyle, from their employer. And so what that does is it raises the costs of manufacturing, right? And so all of a sudden, a company that was paying a person $100 a week now is paying them $150 a week, because to compensate for extra hours worked, for example, or sometimes it's because of, there's a problem in the supply chain, like an event that happens, which raises the cost of the ingredients. But if we just keep it simple, because the standards of living are rising and it's costing the manufacturer, the employer, extra money, these standards are, now they have to provide, for example, cushioned shoes for people that stand all day, for example, so they have to pay for that. They have to manufacture the shoes and they have to buy the ingredients, blah, 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 all that sort of stuff. We're just talking about one nation here, right? Mm-hmm. There's no other nations. So there came a point where the profit margins were getting slimmer and slimmer because of these increased costs. And at the same time, the workers were getting paid more and more. Then all of a sudden, what happened was, all right, there's a country overseas, right, that we don't need to worry about all these standards when we hire these people to work for us. So why don't we just move our factory to that nation where the standards of living that we have to pay for here, we don't have to pay for over there, right? And so all of a sudden, the very original profit margins that they used to make back when there was no standards and no laws and no discrimination laws and all that are happening again, because this other nation, this new nation, doesn't have these standards like we do. So what's happened is the people in your home country have lost. They're all become unemployed now. But the factory, the employer, the owners of these products haven't lost anything, because now you might think, oh, well, it costs them to move the factory. Yeah, that's just cost inputs that they'll write off, right? And they'll make back. So now you got your own people who are unemployed, but you got people in another country.
Yeah, but half the country isn't unemployed.
Yeah. This is like a very basic
example. Okay.
Yeah. So that's how globalization first started, right?
So, but part of the reason they outsourced to other countries was because it was cheaper.
Yeah, it's purely profit margins, because the inputs that go into producing something is much, much lower than the cost of the inputs if you do it in your home country.
Yeah, so what I'm saying is it seems unfair for them because their living standards are so low.
Yeah.
They're not getting paid the amount that would create a better living standard for them.
Yeah, but that's the thing with globalization. So it goes back to globalization. What happens is, as you employ more and more people in this other country, right, this foreign country, eventually as the country grows and the government of that nation is making money now from taxes, collecting taxes, because their people are working now. They start building roads and they start building hospitals and schools. What happens is those very people start to demand a higher type of lifestyle. More, exactly what happened in the home country, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So in China now, you got manufacturing firms, going to African countries because the standard of living has risen so much in China that it's no longer making those firms are no longer making the same profit margins they were at the beginning. What globalization does is it lifts the entire nation to a higher standard of living.
China doesn't have that high standard of living. Like, where are you getting that from? Like, some of them live in, like, boxes.
Yeah, because China is a unique nation because of the vast amount of people in it.
Yeah.
But if you went to a country with only 100 million people and you duplicated the China experiment to that nation, it would have reached the same standard of living that Australia has if it started at the same time as when we started going to China. The reason parts of China still have a lot of poverty is because of the vast amount of people, right? The capacity of China hasn't been reached yet.
So you don't see companies outsourcing their work to China as exploitation?
It can't be at the moment. It's not exploitation. No, it's purely cost. So the managers of these corporations don't sit down on the boardroom and say, which people can we screw over? That's not how they think. They don't say, who do we hate? Which nation do we hate? Let's go and exploit those people. No, they're just saying, where can we manufacture to make the most amount of profit?
Right.
They don't set out to exploit any one type of person or people.
Just because they're not intentionally setting out to exploit people doesn't mean that they're not doing it, right?
Yeah. So it seems like they're exploiting only because the host country, the country they're going to, the government is either weak or it's easily bought off, or there's some characters that may be corrupt. Do you know? So
it's their own country that's doing it to them.
Well, it's
just from what I know. Like, I'm not an expert, but for example, like a sweatshop in India, like they have a manager who's sort of running the place, and they've got Indian workers working 12-hour days, getting paid like $1.
Yeah, that exploitation. See, it's how you look at it. It's how you frame it. It's all about framing. Yes, there's some responsibility on the foreign firm that goes into the nation, right? Because what they're doing is it's like turning a blind eye, right? They're saying that's how the system works. We're going to take advantage of it. So in a way, that's exploitation. You could say that's exploitation. But what about the host government? What about the government that governs for these actual workers? How come they're not opening their mouth and demanding, a higher wage or a higher standard?
Yeah, the blame gets put on the Western company.
The blame gets put on the Western companies.
When it's like, well, why are these countries accepting the offer?
Yeah, these countries are accepting. Yeah, they're exploiting their own. Obviously, you can justify why they accept.
Because they're so poor?
They're so poor and they just need the door to be opened.
Right.
Right? Like if you think about China 60 years ago, it's vastly different from China today. Right?
How so?
Oh, it's vastly different. Like in every single way you can imagine. Like China 60 years ago was like a third world country. You could equate it to a third world country. It's vastly different. Now China is comparable with Western nations, any Western nation in the world, any at all. So there's no.
And that was due to the outsourcing of work.
That's all
things?
due. That's all due to the very nations that are now seem to be in a cold war with China. You see, that's the irony of it. That's the irony of it. The very nations that gave China a hand are now seen as the enemy.
Right.
But that's what I'm saying. Globalization is a good thing because you can go in any nation, and even though it might be very low wages, like $2 a day, for example, wages, eventually, as that country starts to reach capacity, right? So all its workforce is at almost full capacity, and the money that's been generated over the years is being used to build schools and hospitals. It's not going into some dictator's pocket, right? Like some corrupt person's pocket. Then the standard of living will have to rise. There's no way it can't.
What you're saying is globalization has risen everyone's country's standard of living.
The word globalization has raised the entire planet's standard of living.
So in your mind, globalization is a good thing?
Yeah, definitely. Globalization is a must, right? But I don't agree with everything that's happened.
Right.
And the reason is because there's a lot of bad decisions along the way. Now, some of those bad decisions are just, because they were working, the people that made them were working with whatever information they had at the time, and they thought that was the best decision to make. But some of them were purely based on greed, capital greed, right? And some of them were based on things that, like governments made wrong decisions for their people because they just wanted to get favor with other nations.
Yeah.
So there's bad decisions all across the decades or the century of globalization. But in the grand scheme of things, globalization is a good thing.
But it's never going to be a peaceful, harmonious.
Yeah, it will never reach the pinnacle of peace, right? But if it's handled correctly, if good decisions are made, it will eventually come to a point of not near perfection, but, like good enough. But as hiccups come up, so a hiccup could be, hiccups could be like a natural disaster, for example. That could really, wreck things
right.
for a while, for a small period. But if it's human nature and there's a nation that wants to invade another nation, what I think eventually will happen is globalization itself will develop mechanisms to deal with problems like that, with scenarios like that. As the world gets closer, more unified, more harmonious, more harmony between the nations, there'll be protocols for these sort of scenarios, right? Okay. What if a nation wants to invade another nation? What if a European nation, what if one of the 28 European nations now wants to invade another nation that's from the other 28, right? What do you think? Do you think the EU has mechanisms to deal with something like that?
They do now.
Yeah, they must. They're so intertwined, right, together. The economies and the movement of people and just everything you can imagine, right? I mean, they've got policies that are thousands of pages long, to deal with cucumbers and cabbages. Do you know what I mean? So
our society is much more interconnected today than it was.
Yeah, it's much more interconnected.
And it's getting more and more interconnected.
Yeah, what we want is a more interconnected world, but we want peace to be, at the forefront of that interconnectivity.
Okay.
And that's what globalization should mean. Now, there's a whole section of people in the world that think globalization is evil because it is leading everyone to some type of one world dictatorship. When they talk about one world government, they're talking about nations giving up their sovereignty. But globalization has nothing to do with nations giving up their sovereignty. It has something to do with an increase in lifestyle and life standards of peoples all across the world through interconnectivity in trade and education. And, imagine this. Australia might be a world leader in agricultural practices, for example, right?
Yeah.
So all the nations of the world, if someone wants to study to become the best of the best in agriculture, they go to an Australian university. Yep, they book a plane and come here and we accept them and we teach them, right? And then you might have another nation like Germany. It might be a world leader in mechanical engineering. So if you want to be the best mechanical engineer in the world, you go to Germany to one of their college programs over there. That's the kind of globalization that we want to talk about, right?
I've heard people say globalization is the enemy of nationalism. Or do they work hand in hand?
Well, with all things, it's never black and white, right? Because you can have someone who is a nationalist but still believes in international trade. So they're a nationalist why are they a nationalist? Because they want what do they want to do?
What is a nationalist?
Yeah, again, see, there's no clear definition these days. It's not like you can't open a dictionary and whatever the definition of that word is applies in today's world because it doesn't. There's so many sort of shades of grey within politics. That's the whole game of politics.
I mean, the definition of nationalism I know is just people wanting a national identity. It's separate from culture because we're a multi-ethnic country, Australia, right?
Yeah.
But being underpinned by a national identity, Australian. That's my understanding of it. But I don't know if that's
true. That's different. Yeah. So you can have a nationalist who wants to nationalize the economy.
Yeah.
Right? Like move the energy companies from private to state owned. Sort of big government type nationalists, or you can have what you're just talking about there is more of an identity, a national identity, where the entire nation comes around a certain set of values and it binds everyone together, right? So you could be Aboriginal, or you could be, Chinese Australian, or you could be from New Zealand Australian, or you could be a descendant of the convicts that originally came here. But there's a common thread that binds all of us together as Australian, right? And it makes us proud to be Australian. You know what I mean?
Do you think we have that?
No, we haven't reached that yet. No.
Do you think we're on the road to getting there, or?
Yeah, we're on the road to getting there. Yeah, because the road to get to there is not a straight, smooth path, right? It has to be bumpy and it has to have many curves, many turns, but eventually we'll get there. Yeah, you can't. There's never ever an easy path for something good, right?
Yeah.
If you want anything good in life, you have to fight for, you have to struggle for.
There is recently a rise in people recognizing their cultural identity.
Yeah. So with that,
which is not a bad thing at all.
No, it's not a bad thing.
But does that divide us from having a national identity?
Yeah, well, it could. It depends how it's handled, right? If you choose to promote your culture over the host nation that you live in, right? That
would almost disconnect you from it.
Yeah.
But then how do you have those things hand in hand?
Yeah. What you got to do is you got to appreciate your heritage, but also somehow bind it with your current heritage, which is where you live. Yeah. It's like, for example, if you're
what about you? You're Egyptian.
Yeah. So
you're Australian.
I was born in Egypt. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I identify as Australian, right?
Are you connected to your Egyptian?
Yeah, I'm connected
culture?
there. Yeah, because I speak the language. I eat the foods. When I see a documentary on ancient Egypt, I'm interested. I study the old text. I study the original languages of the indigenous languages of Egypt, for example, all that sort of stuff. So the connection is there. I don't abandon that heritage, but I'm Australian, so my loyalty is to Australia, not to Egypt.
Right.
So
do you think many people see it that way?
Well, that's the issue. If they don't see it like that, that's when you start to run into problems. There's nothing wrong with appreciating and promoting your original heritage, because even the 5, 6, 7 generation Aussie, you can still trace them. You got to understand that there's no one in this nation other than the indigenous people that didn't come from overseas, right? Yeah. And Australia is not old. It's not 500 years old. It's only like 200 something years old, right?
Well, as an Australian nation, yeah.
Yeah, as a nation. So even if you're a descendant of one of the original First Fleet convicts, you probably have relatives in Ireland or Scotland or England somewhere, right?
Yeah.
That you might be in touch with. So you don't abandon your heritage, right? But their loyalty is to Australia. It's not to a foreign nation.
It's funny. It depends as well which pockets of people you hang out with, because some people really encourage, let's look at ourselves in terms of our ethnicity. And when I think about I wouldn't say I've got a cultural identity. I mean, I essentially descend from the UK.
You're from New Zealand.
Well, I'm from New Zealand. I see myself as a Kiwi, but I feel like pressure to see myself as a descendant from Britain. I suppose the tricky thing is I can't even get a passport from Britain.
Yeah, because
I'm so far removed.
Yeah. But that's the thing. There's nothing. I just want to emphasize that there is absolutely nothing wrong with promoting and loving your heritage, right? Because if you were to deny your heritage, you're actually denying a piece of who you are, your makeup. Because even if you were born here, right, through parents that immigrated to Australia, their cultural influences would rub off on you, right? Even though you were born here and your very first schooling was here and you grew up here and your accent is Australian and, you eat Australian foods and all that sort of stuff, right? You can't avoid the heritage that's getting rubbed off on you from your parents or your grandparents even. So,
but that heritage is I'm from New Zealand. It's New Zealand. I don't see it as British. Do you understand what I mean?
Yeah. I do. Yeah, I do. I understand. Yeah.
It's weird. I don't know if there's I don't even really know what the question is I'm asking or what the answer is there, but it is. It's very interesting.
Yeah. You don't want
because when you look at yourself in terms of your ethnic identity, you're like, yeah, I'm Egyptian. But if I look at myself in terms of my ethnic identity, I'm like, I'm not British. Like I'm a New Zealander.
Yeah.
But even though we're not the
you're not the original New Zealander.
We're not the original.
Yeah, but it's the same with
we're not.
Yeah, it's like what I'm saying. It's the same with those Aussies now that can trace their heritage back to the original convicts.
Yeah,
right? Because they're no longer British. I mean, you got to understand, like they were kicked out of England. They were kicked out. Like this was a punishment. It wasn't. They weren't given a first class cabin flight here.
No,
right? So they were booted out of their own country, but over time they don't hate the original country. They don't hate the UK. They can identify with it, and don't forget they would have had ancestors that would have fought for England. Like don't forget, World War One. If you look at the rhetoric of the Australian government, they were essentially fighting for Britain. Do you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So, and the same with World War Two and that sort of stuff. So this debate in Australia has been going on for centuries. I remember John Howard once gave a speech about whether are we British enough, or are we American enough, or are we just Aussie enough? You know what I mean? So if you choose to celebrate your heritage, that's good. Like go for it.
Mm-hmm.
And teach people about it. And, like if, for example, if you come from a nation that has, I like food, right? Me personally. So if you come from a nation that has really nice foods, I'm interested in that, right? I may have never been to that country. I may not speak the language, but because it's your heritage and you're proud of it and you're teaching me about it and you're introducing me to these new, these foods, then, I'm going to appreciate it with you. But you're also an Aussie.
I don't know. I find this emphasis on group identity interesting but reductive.
Yeah, because we were talking about globalisation.
Yeah, we've gone off
and
there.
and because it's
all related.
It's related because as the world globalizes,
mm-hmm.
these sort of issues become front and center,
mm-hmm.
right? Because but that's what I'm saying. Globalization could be a good thing because it helps deal with these issues in a good way. For example, if Australia and New Zealand, right, had they were so interconnected that people can just go back and forth and trade back and forth. I mean, it's New Zealand. It's not a good example to use, but if you were to trade with, say, African nations, right, Australian African nations. If it came to a point where it can be done in a safe way that's secure for the peoples of both nations, right?
Yeah.
International travel, trade, education, if they've got an issue and they need 200 nurses from Australia, yep, or firefighters, yep, done. It's just a procedural thing. If we get to that level, then if you have people living here who originally come from that nation, the question of whether am I Australian or am I from that nation, am I more this or more that, becomes, it's no longer a burning question. It's just, you're fortunate enough to enjoy both cultures.
Yeah.
And that's the good thing about globalization. Yeah. The entire premise of globalization is bringing the best of that the world has to offer, the best that every nation has to offer to the rest of the nations, to the rest of the world.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you think Australia remaining as part of the constitutional monarchy is a good thing?
So you asked me whether I'm a Republican or not. Is that your question?
No. Well, I mean, not the Republican.
Well, I can answer it without telling you because I can say that so far the system has worked really well, right? The head of state for Australia is technically, right, the King of Australia, but this king doesn't live in Australia. This king lives in a foreign nation. So because he lives in a foreign nation, we have to appoint someone not to replace the king, but to represent the king, right? And that person's called the Governor General. Now, I can see why some people aren't happy with that, because they want the head of state to be someone living in Australia, maybe grew up in Australia, definitely grew up in Australia, definitely understands Australian culture, is just one of the people, someone from the nation, someone from the population to represent them. And I can see why the Republican movement thinks like that.
Well, what are the benefits of becoming a republic?
Well, see, that's the funny thing about the Australian system, because if it becomes republic, not much will change on the ground for people. Like the people everyday, day-to-day activities, it's not going to change. There'll be no difference.
And we'll still have the protection from the UK of
the closeness of Australia and the UK, and the UK is now getting more active back in this region. For many decades, it's been sort of gone, but it's getting more active again. And look, Australia and UK will always be united, connected through their heritage, through their joint heritage. Don't forget how many Australians spilled their blood just for the crown, like for the empire, the UK empire, right? So if we are a republic one day, there's no danger of, it doesn't mean anything on the ground in the day-to-day lives of people.
Okay, I want to move on to some of the stuff we were talking about before, like about people being afraid to say what they think.
Yeah. So for example, some of the stuff I've been saying now might be taken the wrong way. You know how that example I said, if you want to become the best in the world agriculture, you come to Australia, and if you want to be the best at mechanical engineering, you go to Germany.
Yeah.
Well, that could be taken the wrong way. I'm only using that as an example of what globalization could do, right? So each nation specializes in what it does best, right? And when it specializes in what it does best, it takes the full advantage of its resources, its assets, its knowledge, its skill base, its talent base, right? That's all I was trying to get. But if it was taken the wrong way, it might sound like what I'm saying is, Australia is an agricultural country, and that's what it will remain as, and it has to surrender the rest of its sovereignty to the rest of the world. And so, Germany, which is a powerhouse in engineering, and Japan, which is a powerhouse in electronics. Do you know what I mean? Like, I'm not that's the wrong message. I'm not saying that at all, right? So I could have been afraid to say it in the first place, because I don't want someone to take it the wrong way.
You think that's why we're afraid? Because what we think, because everything we say can be taken the wrong way.
Yeah, every single thing we say.
You put it out online or out into the.
Well, so if you wanted to run for parliament, right, and in 2020, when's the next election? 2025, in 3 years from now, right? So and then someone hears this podcast and he goes, you know what? Melody said she doesn't even feel Australian. She doesn't even feel New Zealand. She actually feels more British than any other nation. And, she's never lived in England, and she grew up in New Zealand, and now she lives in Australia. Like, why should we vote for her? You know what I mean? Like, people could get offended at that. But you didn't mean to offend. You were just talking about the struggles of cultural identity. Yeah,
but I would put the onus on the person who's misconstruing what I'm saying.
Yeah, but you can't do that. You know why? Because they'll vastly outnumber you, and they could be placed anywhere, all over the nation.
But then, so
you can't go head to head with people who disagree with you like that.
So that means if I want to be a politician, I can't say anything that might be against what the people that I'm trying to get vote for me think.
Yeah, that's one of the problems with current day politics. It's a dilemma that we've reached in our current day world, that people, especially people that want to represent you, might not say what they really want to say because they're worried someone will be offended.
What about just everyday people? We want people to like us.
Yeah.
So I might not say, I just feel like today we're judged more on what we say than who we are or how we treat people. If you vote against gay marriage or whatever, you're seen as a bad person. But I would say, well, I mean, it's not ideal for me, I guess. But what matters more is how you treat me.
Yeah.
You vote against gay marriage, but you treat me.
You're only seen as a bad person if you believe in a certain ideology. If the other side, if the opposing ideology views you as, essentially the gay rights, the gay marriage thing is basically you got one side saying it's wrong because either for theological reasons or because it's against nature is another argument. It's unnatural, something like that. You got one side saying they oppose it because of those sort of reasons. And then you got the other side saying, well, you can't, love is love, human rights, everyone has a right to be married, to be happy. Because, you can't help who you fall in love with.
Yeah, so each side...
I'm oversimplifying it.
No, but each side sees the other side as bad for what they think on this issue.
Yeah,
but I'm like, it doesn't
matter.
Really. Well, it does sort of matter what you think, but I have people that are I'm obviously for gay marriage.
Yeah.
But what I'm trying to say is it seems like people that are for gay marriage are automatically judged as good, and people who are against gay marriage are automatically judged as bad in the mainstream culture. And I'm saying that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. What matters is how you treat me as a person.
Yeah. But
I'm just wondering why we're not judging people by how they treat you. We're judging people on what their views are on these political debates.
Yeah. But when you say automatically viewed as this in mainstream culture, I mean, you got to define mainstream culture, because
what is acceptable? Mainstream culture can be sort of subjective, but I would say mainstream culture, you're not going to have someone who's anti-gay on any of the TV. You're not going to have an anti-gay show on Netflix. Come on, let's be real. You're not going to have someone that's openly, outwardly anti-gay and put them on TV. I mean, that person will just get reprimanded by society. Even surely you know what I mean, but when I say mainstream culture.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
There's acceptable
you're
beliefs.
You're saying that on the mainstream networks, TV networks, radio networks,
they dominate our culture.
Newspapers. If a person has a view that is seen as not acceptable in today's world, they may not get airtime.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. But that's true. Okay. You can probably say that only because you can prove it through the numbers, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like how many guests actually believe this, right? You could make that argument.
There's proof for that. Like conservative beliefs, even on Twitter, I'm not sure now that Elon Musk has taken over, but conservative beliefs are censored.
Yeah.
And I can,
but then I can
sort of understand why.
You've got conservative papers and networks, though.
Yeah, but they're like
one of the biggest
mainstream, like Sky News, like that's conservative, but that's not mainstream, really.
Yeah, I mean, it's growing, isn't it? It's growing. But, when you listen to these talkback shows, whether it's TV or, like these opinion programs, one of the biggest dangers, like one of the things I noticed straight away is that the guests are usually revolving. So the same guest revolving. It's like a revolving door with the same guests all the time.
Yeah.
Same people that they ask opinions of. And there's a danger there because that person's ideological stance. Mm-hmm. And if they come every third show, then you already know how they're going to answer or what their opinion is on a particular topic before they even open their mouth. So it's not new. So the viewer, like someone like me, I'm listening to the show, and then I see this guest come to give their opinion on a political issue of the day. Before they even open their mouth, I already know what that opinion is because I know this guest, you see?
Yeah.
I know their ideological stance. That is the biggest danger, I think, with current networks. What you want is a guest, doesn't matter what their ideological stance is, they're able to debate both sides. So that the viewer
doesn't appeal to the viewer, does it?
Well, and the other way to get around that is you bring two guests, one from each side.
Oh well, those shows are. So I actually think those shows debates. I think there's a YouTube channel, Common Ground. Like those shows, you sort of actually end up learning the most.
Yeah.
But we're addicted to our own confirmation bias, right?
Yeah. So people who watch a certain network watch it because what they listen to makes them comfortable.
Yeah, and it's confirming their beliefs. I mean, I suppose what I try to do is, I watch Sky News and whatever other network.
Like you watch Sky, you watch ABC.
Yeah, well, I don't watch TV, but this is just on YouTube and stuff.
Yeah. Well, if you watch Sky and if you watch Sky, you're definitely watching people on the right of the center line, right?
But there also seems to be a willingness to discuss issues on the right. I'm not talking about the far right. I'm talking about just a general conservative. There's more of a willingness to openly discuss things than there is on the left mainstream news, and I can't quite work out why that is.
Yeah.
Would you agree or no?
Well, see, traditionally I identified as centre right, so. Like I always thought was, I mean, that's how I was raised, you see. So when I listen to, like I read the Australian newspaper, but I also read, Sydney Morning Herald. It's funny because with me, these kind of issues, I like to listen to both sides. When I say I identified as centre right, but I always thought that was the centre. But, my views are centrist. I think I've listened to enough of centre right, centre left commentators and read books and papers. There's no way that I couldn't be a centrist.
Yeah, right.
So to me, like if you listen to Sky and they're having a one-sided debate, then that's no good. But if you're also listening to the ABC and they're having a one-sided debate, that can't be good either. Do you know what I mean? You gotta be able to
look at it from both sides and find a happy medium.
Yeah. It's always the problem in today's, it's not always a problem. It's definitely a problem today in today's world, because when you turn Sky on, they're always complaining about the ABC. But then when you turn the ABC on, is Sky correct? Is Sky, are the Sky opinionators correct? Is the ABC biased? What do you think?
Oh, I think they definitely both skew to their side. Yeah, for sure. That's why I'm saying you got to sort of look at both.
Yeah. So in that case, that means Sky itself is skewed towards the right.
It is, of course.
So there's an inherent bias there built in.
Yeah. And then the ABC is skewed to the left.
Yeah. But not to the extent of, one nation, one channel being, communist and the other one being fascist.
No. That's like a false dichotomy.
Yeah. So it's just one of those things. Like if you're going to have an opinion show or a current affairs show, you want at least a balance in guests so that the viewers get both sides of the story.
Okay. But so the world needs more nuance, eh? Would you say that?
Well, yeah, it needs more centrist.
Centrist, yeah. Right.
Centrist, yeah.
All right, Morad. I'm ready to wrap up, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. Keep it short. You make my editing job easy.
Yeah,
It's nearly an hour, isn't it? You're not going to be easy.
Is it really? Wow.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. All right, man. Hey, thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks, Melanie. I appreciate it.
Cool. Thank you.
Yeah.